Very alarmingly, there comes a moment when the narcissist finally understands that they have truly lost someone they can never replace. Welcome back to the Narcissist Code, and today we are exploring a powerful moment in narcissistic psychology. The point where a narcissist realizes that the person they underestimated is no longer available to control, influence, or manipulate. Take a moment to think about this idea because it reveals something important about how narcissistic relationships work. If this topic connects with your experience, support the channel by liking, subscribing, and sharing. This conversation is about understanding the deeper patterns behind narcissistic behavior and what happens when the person they once took for granted finally chooses themselves. Many people have asked for a deeper perspective on this subject because the realization of loss can create a major internal shift for a narcissist. What they often fail to understand during the relationship is the true value of the person standing beside them. They become so focused on control, validation, and maintaining their own image that they overlook the damage they are creating. But when that person finally walks away, the narcissist is forced to face a reality they avoided for a long time. This is not only about losing one relationship, it represents a pattern of losing meaningful connections because of their own destructive behaviors. Narcissism often affects every relationship around them because their need for control and superiority slowly damages the bonds they create. The narcissist often survives by creating confusion, hiding their true intentions, and shifting blame onto others. Over time, they build a pattern of unhealthy relationships where people leave feeling drained, hurt, and emotionally exhausted. You may not have recognized these patterns when you first entered their life, but with distance and awareness, the truth starts becoming clearer. When the narcissist finally realizes what they have lost, they may begin looking back at the choices they made and the consequences that followed. They are not untouchable or above mistakes. They are human beings with their own weaknesses and unresolved issues. Eventually, they may see the broken trust, missed opportunities, and relationships they damaged because of their own actions. They may come to understand that manipulation, dishonesty, and emotional games do not create a fulfilling life. Instead, those behaviors often lead to isolation and emptiness. However, while the narcissist may eventually recognize their losses, your journey after experiencing that kind of relationship is often much more difficult. The emotional impact can stay with you for a long time, and healing is rarely a quick process. Recovering from manipulation, confusion, and emotional pain requires patience, self-awareness, and a willingness to rebuild yourself. It takes time to regain the confidence and peace that were taken away during the relationship. Slowly, you begin to reconnect with your own strength and understand that your future does not have to be controlled by the damage someone else caused. As you continue healing, you may eventually face the question of forgiveness. You may wonder whether you should forgive the narcissist, whether you can release the anger, or whether you can simply move forward without carrying the weight of what happened. But before you can even think about forgiveness, there is important work that needs to happen first. You must begin breaking the emotional attachment, understanding the trauma bond, and creating distance from the unhealthy patterns that kept you connected. Sometimes healing requires difficult decisions, such as changing your environment, stepping away from certain people, or completely rebuilding your life. A new beginning often requires letting go of everything that keeps you tied to the past. It is important to understand that narcissistic behavior is not something that can simply be ignored or easily excused. Many people who experience these relationships never saw the manipulation coming because narcissists often present themselves very differently in the beginning. They create an image that attracts trust, kindness, and emotional investment before revealing their true patterns. If someone had shown you their intentions and behaviors from the very beginning, you likely would have protected yourself and walked away. But instead, many narcissistic relationships begin through deception, confusion, and emotional illusion. Once the damage is done, the person left behind often has to rebuild from the emotional wounds created by someone who refused to take responsibility. The most powerful realization comes when the narcissist looks back and understands the value of what they lost. They may remember the loyalty, patience, and genuine care they received, but failed to appreciate. They may recognize that their repeated patterns pushed away someone who truly wanted to love and support them. The people they once controlled eventually become the people they can no longer reach. And that moment can be deeply unsettling for them because they realize that the person they thought would always be available has chosen freedom instead. The greatest loss for a narcissist is not simply losing a relationship. It is losing access to someone who finally recognized their own worth and refused to return to the same cycle. At the end of a relationship with a narcissistic person, you may not immediately recognize the separation as a form of freedom. Instead, you might feel devastated because you were still trapped inside the emotional attachment created by the trauma bond. You may have held on to the hope that one day they would finally understand your pain, change their behavior, and give you the peace you deserved. But many narcissistic patterns do not work that way. Their focus is often centered on their own needs rather than your emotional well-being. When they decide a relationship is no longer serving them, they may choose a moment when you are already struggling and emotionally exhausted. That painful experience can feel like being discarded, but it also reveals the reality of the dynamic you were trapped in. Many narcissistic individuals are constantly searching for new sources of attention, admiration, validation, or support. They move through relationships looking for people who can provide what they feel they need. But eventually, there can come a moment when they look back and remember the people who truly gave them something meaningful, including you. However, their memories are often connected to what they received rather than genuine appreciation for who you were. They may remember your kindness, your patience, your loyalty, and the emotional support you offered because those things benefited them. In their mind, you may have represented something valuable that strengthened their confidence and filled their emotional emptiness. But this realization does not always mean they understand your worth in the same way you did. If you are currently experiencing a breakup with a narcissistic partner, understand that the process can feel extremely painful because they know the qualities that made you valuable in the relationship. They know you were someone who cared deeply, someone who offered understanding, compassion, and emotional support. Those qualities are powerful, and they are not easily replaced. This is why some narcissistic individuals struggle to completely let go. It is not always because they suddenly understand love in a healthy way. Sometimes it is because they recognize that they lost access to something that made their life easier and made them feel better about themselves. Learning about narcissistic behavior can help you understand why the relationship affected you so deeply. Many people realize afterward how much energy, time, and emotional effort they invested while receiving very little in return. The narcissist may also recognize what they lost because they experienced the difference between what you provided and what others provide. Every person brings something unique into a relationship, and what you offered may have been something they cannot easily find again. Your patience, commitment, and willingness to fight for the relationship were not ordinary things. You may have entered the relationship with genuine intentions, believing in love, trust, and partnership, while they may have viewed the relationship through a completely different lens, focused on control and personal benefit. When the relationship finally ends, some narcissistic individuals may attempt to return through a behavior known as hoovering. This happens when they try to pull someone back into their emotional cycle after losing access to them. They may suddenly appear more caring, express regret, bring up memories, or act as if they have changed. But often, the purpose is not true transformation. It is an attempt to regain the attention, validation, or support they once received. They remember how your presence made them feel. They remember the encouragement, emotional stability, financial help, or constant understanding you provided. Those things became sources of comfort for them, and losing them can create a sense of emptiness. When a narcissist tries to reconnect, it is important to understand the pattern behind their actions. The goal may not be to rebuild a healthy relationship, but to restore the old dynamic where they had access to your energy and emotional investment. They may attempt different methods to convince you that things will be different, especially if they sense that you are finally moving forward. But the most important thing to remember is that your healing and peace matter more than their desire to return. The moment you recognize your own value, you stop being a source they can control and become someone who chooses their own future. The biggest question many people ask is this: will a narcissist ever look back and truly understand what they lost? The answer is complicated. In many cases, they may eventually recognize that they lost someone valuable, but admitting that they were wrong is a completely different matter. Their ego often prevents them from accepting responsibility because they see themselves as superior and struggle to face their own mistakes. Looking honestly at the pain they caused, the relationships they damaged, and the people they hurt requires self-awareness, and that is something many narcissistic individuals avoid. They may remember what happened, but that does not always mean they are willing to acknowledge their role in it. Think about all the moments when they apologized after hurting you. How often were those apologies followed by real change? How many times did they promise they would do better, only to repeat the same behavior again? Instead of having genuine conversations, they often replaced accountability with excuses, confusion, and endless explanations designed to shift attention away from their actions. Throughout the relationship, you may have given them your patience, your loyalty, your time, and your emotional energy. You invested yourself fully, while they often focused on what they could receive from you. The painful reality is that many people do not realize the value of something until they no longer have access to it. At the beginning of the relationship, everything may have moved incredibly fast. They appeared deeply interested, constantly available, and eager to create a strong connection. This intensity often made you feel special and chosen, but after they felt secure that they had your attention, the energy began to change. The communication became weaker, the effort decreased, and you started questioning what happened to the person you first met. You may have wondered if they became bored, if they found someone else to focus on, or if they simply stopped trying because they believed you would always stay. This is why trusting your intuition matters. When something feels different, your feelings are often noticing changes before your mind fully understands them. Once they believed they had secured your attachment, the dynamic often shifted. They knew you cared, they knew you wanted answers, and they knew you would respond when they reached out. You might have found yourself waiting for messages, hoping for the same warmth and attention they showed in the beginning. But slowly, the conversations became shorter and colder. Instead of meaningful discussions, you received distant replies and minimal effort. Meanwhile, you could see them giving their time, attention, and energy to others as if it was effortless. That contrast can be deeply painful. You may have wondered why someone else received thoughtful conversations while you received almost nothing. The reason is often connected to their pattern of seeking new attention and repeating the same cycle with different people. When a narcissistic person loses someone who genuinely cared about them, that loss can eventually become impossible to ignore. Over time, they may begin noticing the consequences of their own behavior. They may see friendships becoming weaker, family relationships becoming damaged, or professional connections becoming harder to maintain. The image they worked so hard to create can start falling apart when their actions no longer match the person they pretend to be. A mask can only be maintained for so long. Eventually, repeated patterns become visible, and people begin recognizing the behavior they once overlooked. Some people wonder how narcissists can maintain long-term friendships if they are so destructive. But the length of a relationship does not always reveal the quality of that relationship. Some connections exist because they support an image, provide benefits, or remain on the surface without true emotional closeness. A person can know someone for many years and still never truly understand who they are behind closed doors. Many people only see the public version of a narcissist, the charming and impressive personality they show to the world. The people closest to them are often the ones who experience the hidden side that others never see. This is why many people do not recognize narcissistic behavior immediately. Some may notice the signs but stay silent because they do not want to become the next person targeted by their anger or manipulation. Others simply do not spend enough private time with the person to see the difference between the public image and the private reality. The more time someone spends around a narcissistic individual, the easier it becomes to notice the patterns. Behind closed doors, the behavior can be completely different from what others see in public. While they may appear kind, generous, and caring around others, the person closest to them may experience emotional exhaustion, confusion, and deep hurt. But here is the part that matters most. The narcissist may eventually understand that they lost you, even if they never admit it. Their pride may stop them from saying the words out loud, But that does not erase the reality. They knew your value when they first entered your life. They recognized your kindness, your support, and your ability to give them something meaningful. They simply failed to appreciate it because they believed you would always be there. They may have taken your love for granted, but losing you creates a reality they cannot avoid forever. The difference is that while they remain trapped in the same patterns, you have the opportunity to grow beyond them. You survived the pain, learned from the experience, and rebuilt yourself stronger than before. You rose from a situation that once felt impossible and became more aware of your own worth. While they continue repeating the same cycles with new people who may not yet see the truth, you are creating a life based on healing, confidence, and self-respect. They may have lost someone valuable, but you gained something even more important: yourself. Stay strong, trust your journey, and remember that your future is no longer defined by the person who failed to recognize your value. The cycle described in this situation is the repeating pattern that keeps many people emotionally trapped in unhealthy relationships. It often begins with an intense connection where everything feels powerful and different from anything you have experienced before. The attention, affection, and promises can make you believe you have finally found someone who truly understands you. But slowly, the energy starts changing. The same person who once made you feel special begins creating confusion, distance, and emotional pain. You start questioning what changed, what you did wrong, and why the person who once seemed so invested is suddenly acting like you no longer matter. This pattern can continue because every moment of distance is often followed by moments that bring back hope. Just when you begin accepting the reality of the situation, they may return with kindness, affection, or promises that things will be different. Those brief moments can make you hold on because you remember the person they were in the beginning and hope that version will come back permanently. But without real self-awareness and change, the same behaviors often repeat again and again. The relationship becomes a constant emotional battle between the good memories you want to believe in and the painful reality you are experiencing. Over time, this cycle can slowly affect the way you see yourself. You may start putting more effort into proving your worth, trying harder to earn love, and waiting for the same level of care you once received. Instead of feeling secure, you find yourself chasing moments of connection and wondering when the next shift will happen. The emotional confusion becomes exhausting because you are constantly trying to understand someone who keeps changing the rules of the relationship. But the moment you recognize the cycle, everything begins to change. You start seeing that the problem was never about you not being enough. You begin understanding that love should not feel like a constant struggle for attention, respect, or basic kindness. Breaking away from this pattern means choosing peace over confusion and valuing yourself enough to stop participating in a cycle that continues to hurt you. The strongest moment comes when you stop waiting for someone else to change and start creating the change within your own life. The idea of validation and supply goes deeper into understanding why some narcissistic individuals constantly seek attention, admiration, and reassurance from others. For them, external reactions can become a way of maintaining their confidence and protecting the image they have created about themselves. They may depend on compliments, praise, loyalty, or emotional support because these things temporarily make them feel important and powerful. The problem is that this need is often endless. No matter how much attention they receive, it may never feel like enough because the emptiness they are trying to avoid comes from within. This is why some narcissistic individuals can move from one person to another, searching for the same feelings they once received from someone else. They are not always looking for a genuine emotional connection. Sometimes they are looking for someone who can continue providing reassurance, patience, and support. They may be attracted to people who are compassionate, understanding, and willing to give because those qualities make the relationship easier for them. But over time, the imbalance becomes clear because one person is constantly giving while the other person is mainly focused on receiving. The painful part is that the person providing this emotional support may not realize how much they are giving away until they feel completely drained. They may spend years trying to understand, help, and support someone who rarely stops to ask what they need in return. They keep offering chances, believing that their love and patience will eventually create change. But the truth is that one person's love cannot fix another person's unwillingness to take responsibility for their own actions. When someone finally removes themselves from this dynamic, the narcissistic individual may feel the absence of what that person provided. They may notice the loss of the encouragement, attention, and emotional energy they once had access to. But the most important realization is that your value was never based on what you could provide to someone else. Your kindness, loyalty, and compassion were valuable because they were a reflection of who you are, not because they made someone else feel better. True healing begins when you stop seeing yourself as a source of someone else's needs and start recognizing yourself as someone who deserves a relationship built on mutual respect, honesty, and genuine care. The conclusion of this journey is understanding that the greatest victory is not making the narcissist regret losing you. It is reaching a place where their actions no longer control your emotions, your confidence, or your future. For a long time, you may have focused on whether they would finally realize your worth, whether they would miss you, or whether they would understand the damage they caused. But the most powerful transformation happens when you stop waiting for their realization and start embracing your own. Their awareness, their regret, or their inability to admit the truth no longer determines your healing. A narcissist may eventually look back and recognize that they lost someone who genuinely cared, someone who offered loyalty, patience, and love. They may remember the support you gave and the effort you invested. But your freedom does not come from their understanding. Your freedom comes from understanding yourself. You begin to see that walking away was not a loss. It was the moment you chose your own peace over a relationship that constantly took more than it gave. The person who once felt broken by the experience can become someone stronger, wiser, and more aware of their own value. You learn to trust your instincts, protect your energy, and create boundaries that honor your emotional well-being. The same heart that was hurt becomes the source of your strength because you realize that your ability to love deeply was never your weakness. It was always one of your greatest qualities. The narcissist may continue repeating the same patterns, searching for new attention and new sources of validation, but you have the opportunity to break free from that cycle completely. You no longer need to prove your worth to someone who failed to appreciate it. Your growth becomes the final answer. The moment you choose yourself, the control they once had disappears. Remember, losing someone who truly loved you is their loss, but finding yourself again is your greatest victory. Welcome back to the Narcissist Code. If this message connected with you, remember that healing takes time, but every step forward is a reminder that your story does not end with what someone did to you. Your story continues with the person you become after you choose yourself. Stay strong, trust your journey, and let your healing begin.